A few days later, John and Jenny were coming into the apartment. They found two men wearing white shirts and ties in the apartment on the sixth floor. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" John asked. "We are with Homeland Security, and we have some serious questions to ask you," the taller man stated as he flashed his badge. "How did you get in here?" John knew, but he wanted them to say it. "Do you have a warrant?" "We don't need a warrant to haul in someone that is a suspected terrorist," the taller man almost shouted. "It seems to me that it is you who are performing terror." "What are your questions?" John asked us. He was going to put his hat on the hook he normally used. He changed his mind and put it back on his head. Jenny raised her eyebrows as she realized John was planning on going somewhere else. "You seem to have come into a great deal of money. We want to know, who are you working for?" the shorter man asked. John looked at the man. "Myself, my family, and mankind. I am an American and I am living the American dream. I am a Vietnam veteran and a patriot of the United States of America. I hold to my vow to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." "We think you are involved with terrorism." The tall man smiled maliciously. "I had to proof of purchase." John shared, "I have certificates of clean funds." "That could all be bogus." The shorter man looked to the taller man. "You are coming with us." "Do I get to call my lawyer?" John asked. "No," the short man stated. "Can we tell my fiancée where we are going?" John asked. "She is your partner. She's coming too." The little man went over and forced Jenny to her feet. "Honey, I'm taking them to a special place. Do you want to go with us?" John smiled as the tall man attempted to put cuffs on him. "Yes, I would like to see where terrorists go." Jenny was also about to have cuffs put on her. The next second, John and Jenny, along with the two men, were standing on a large metal workman's platform. The men seemed to forget the handcuffs and were mesmerized by the sun. The railing in front of each man opened just enough for each of them to move towards the sun. Then the railing closed again. John and Jenny watched as the two men moved closer to the sun. There were two explosions of flames, and the two men were completely gone. "Daddy!" Gaia touched John's back. John bent down and picked up his future daughter. "Yes, honey, why are you here?" "You need me." Gaia hugged her daddy. Jenny kissed Gaia's cheek and rubbed her back. "What did we just see here?" John asked. "Daddy, the souls on earth are like trees. Sometimes the trees need trimming to bear fruit. Your old books call this hell," Gaia shared. John looked at Jenny. "I guess that fits with all of the mythology in the Bible." "Okay." John looked through his mind on the definition of hell. "Like a moth being drawn to a light bulb. What happens to those men? Do they ever get reborn?" Gaia shook her head. "Not in this eternity. You can't judge Daddy. You just have to make the world safe for me and Mommy." "Thank you, Gaia." When John and Jenny arrived back into the apartment, "They need our help." John moved to the door and Jenny was right behind him as they flew down the stairs to the second floor. The door to the apartment where the two officers were was open. John went to the first officer. He laughed as he brought Pete Mason back from the dead. "I swear I'm going to start hanging out with felons." Pete coughed as John helped him sit up. John looked over and smiled as the other officer opened his eyes and was holding his head up. "Pete, this is what you called easy duty?" "John, Jenny met my new partner, Sam Henson. Sam, tell John and Jenny thank you for saving your life." Pete shook his head. "Sam just started the class. He was hoping to get his yellow lanyard this week." John spied the 3 cases of water and went over and pulled out a couple of bottles. "Well, how do we explain this one to the captain?" Sam asked. "By telling me what happened," Captain Frank suggested as he came through the door. "Hi, Cap," John greeted. "2 men came in flashing badges of the Homeland Security, shot our 2 friends here when they were not expecting it, and then came to sit in our apartment until we came home. They accused me of being a terrorist and were ready to handcuff both Jenny and me when I got word from God to take them to a place just left of the sun. They were like 2 moths being drawn to a bright light, only they were drawn towards the sun until they exploded into flames from the heat." "How are you doing, John?" Captain Frank asked. John looked to the captain. "I'm still in shock. I have believed in reincarnation all my life and have seen almost 100 past lives. I'm being told that as comforter, I will remove the negativity from the planet. That negativity is what is holding this planet and the people on it back from experiencing heaven on earth. Those two men are gone, cut from their soul. They are experiencing what our ancestors defined for us as a place called hell. They will reside there for eternity or the end of this time. Jenny came over and hugged John. She started running healing energy through her mate. The longer she knew John, the more she loved him. Give it to God. Let it go. You stopped everyone's definition of evil. You did not force those men to move towards the sun. I'm not even sure if God was involved. It was more like when a tree loses a branch in a strong wind. You are that strong wind. That wind will not affect those of us here to work for the good of mankind. Jenny took a deep breath and listened, and then spoke much louder. Now take the captain, Bill and Pete, and go finish it. Bill McCormick and his partner showed up at the door and heard, "Take Bill and Pete and go finish it." Bill had the strap off his revolver and his hand on it, ready to pull it. Any bad guys in the building? Later that same day, the four appeared in the center of a large office building. No signs to tell anyone here who the agency or company was. A very loud, raspy voice asked, "How in the hell did you get in here?" "Where are we?" Captain asked. John and the three officers were all wearing blue vests with Seattle Police on the back. "This is a federal building. Seattle Police don't have jurisdiction here," an older lady growled. "This is Homeland Security. You?" The lady reached for her phone. The captain looked at John and nodded. John took a deep breath and closed his eyes. 83 people ended up on the catwalk on the west side of the sun. "Oh, that is so beautiful," the lady said as she looked at the sun. She took a step towards the sun, and the catwalk's guardrail opened, and she moved through the guardrail and continued towards the sun. In less than a minute, she exploded in a burst of flame. The captain moved towards the railing and tried several things to see if it would open for him. Nothing he tried made a difference. He turned to John and nodded. They watched 40 of the remaining 82 go through the guardrail. Some of the younger staff moved toward John and the three officers. When two of the staff were close, "Where are all of the agents?" Captain Frank asked the young male staff person. "They are all in Denver at a conference. Something about Congress passing a new law. The scuttlebutt is that it activates a piece of the Patriot Act, making it easier for the government to take assets." The young staff man looked around him. "The new headquarters for the CIA is being moved to Denver. The spook division is saying something about earth changes coming." "How come you're not in Denver?" Officer Bill asked. The agent made a face. "They only allowed the A team to go to Denver. The B team all went there." Pointing at the sun, "They won't be back, will they?" "No, they won't be back," Captain stated. "Ready to go home?" John asked. "Are you going to get rid of the A team?" the young man asked. "Yes, they're next." The captain answered, then turned to John. "What do we do with these men?" "Take them home. They'll make a positive difference." John theorized. The four men took almost 10,000 agents to the catwalk just west of the sun from the Denver meetings. None of them came back. They agreed to show up at the apartment at 5 a.m. to make the trip to Langley. The next morning, Bill and Pete's partners agreed to partner up temporarily while Bill and Pete watched John and the captain's backs. Their partners watched the building. Everyone arrived a few minutes before 5 o'clock and was ready to go within 10 minutes. "John, I looked up Langley last night. There may be 100,000 people in that complex. I would imagine that place goes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week," Bill shared. "There may be 3 shifts during the week and 2 or 3 part-time positions during the weekend. Maybe 50% of them work during regular business hours during the week." John looked at Bill. "What else did you learn?" Bill looked around. Their intro to the Homeland Security's tour talks of the agency having 230,000 employees. Wow. 8 hours later, John was working up a big pan of spaghetti and the chief was making some phone calls sitting at the breakfast bar. "Hi, honey. How's your day been?" As John was hugging Jenny. "Hi, Peter. Hi, Patty." "Hi, John," Peter said as Patty moved to hug John. "We saw you processing Langley." Jenny smiled. "Did you notice the little groups from Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego?" Jenny was going through the grocery bags that John had brought, which had all the fixing for spaghetti and a cheap bottle of wine. Jenny smiled. John loved his spaghetti with a good splash of burgundy in it. John already had half of the hamburger going in the big fry pan. Jenny also found a couple of large bags of salad fixings with a selection of salad dressings. John poured Prego into their 6-gallon big stainless steel saucepan. Patty grabbed the big cutting board and was cutting up tomatoes into bite-sized pieces. Peter peeled the outer layers off the onions, getting them ready for chopping and sautéing. Yes, we did see you and wondered where and what. John smiled at all of his help. He pulled out the medium-sized mate to the large saucepan and filled it with water to cook the pasta. Patty pushed the cut tomatoes into the big pot. When she was done, Peter took on the onions. When he had 2 of them cut, John drained the fat and grease from the hamburger, and they put the onions in with the hamburger. The vent was working hard to remove all the heat and fumes from the cooking. John turned the oven on to heat the bread. "Where are Bill and Pete?" Jenny asked. "Down talking to your platoon of men, as well as picking up and cooking up to 8 family-sized pizzas from Papa Murphy's." John smiled. "We didn't get lunch." John kissed his mate. "I understand you didn't either." Jenny looked around. "No lunch. We are going to be doing this a lot." Jenny felt her tummy and looked down. "You'll like pizza," she told her little boy. It was still many months before he made his appearance. John noticed that Peter had disappeared. Captain Frank was also missing. A few minutes later, John saw the door open with Peter leading members of his Minute Men team in. Chairs were picked up, the tub of sauce and the tub of pasta were also picked up. Jenny wrapped up the warm bread with 2 big tubs of butter, and Patty had the big bowl of salad with the 8 bottles of dressing. John grabbed the heavy-duty paper plates and their container of forks, knives, spoons. He followed everybody down to the 2nd floor. Peter had 8 sawhorses with 4 sheets of plywood on them, making 4 tables. Patty and Jenny had found drop cloths for painting and used them as tablecloths. John could only vaguely remember how they came about to have 40 or more chairs. The excitement was in the room. They had taken on the best in the world and came back with no losses. Everyone had a plastic cup. Water bottles were all over the 4 tables in reach. The bread was sliced. The pizza was passed out. Plates were covered with spaghetti. Captain Frank stood, and the room became quiet. "May I have a word?" There were laughter and a comment about how he could have as many as he wanted. It is hard to believe that our great nation, founded on the principles of freedom, has become a threat to not only our leaders, but also to every person in the world. I believe we have taken back some freedom today. Our Constitution looks a little healthier right now. Captain Frank looked to John. "You have the floor, Lord John." John looked to Captain Frank, questioning the title with his eyes. Captain Frank just smiled and nodded his head. "I want to know about your Minute Men, Peter." John looked at Peter. Peter stood. "These are the Minute Men and women. They all wear the red lanyards. Last night I alerted them of a possible need. A few minutes after you left, 20 agents from Portland showed up around the building. Jenny, Patty, and I exited the back door. We created a wall of steel around us. One agent even fired when he realized he could not come close to us. He was wounded quite badly. The standoff lasted 15 minutes or so, and then these fine officers started appearing out of the night. The agents flashed their badges and told the Seattle police they did not have jurisdiction in this matter." Peter looked at Kathy. "That is when I identified myself as Lieutenant Kathy Henderson, Seattle Police Department. I advised the gentlemen that by them not alerting the Seattle Police Department, they were being defined as terrorists by our reading of the Patriot Act. I then informed them they were under arrest. 3 of them shot at me. Can you imagine they have no sense of decency?" Everyone laughed. Kathy looked back at Peter. "I had the sense we were all ready. I called for us to take our guest to God. We were there on the west side of the sun in a flash." Peter smiled. "We got to see what you have seen. Evil is drawn to the sun until there is an explosion of flames and then nothing." Peter looked at Jenny. "Okay, I talked this wonderful bunch into taking on the Portland office and then continue on south until we hit San Diego. Somewhere along the line, we learned about the training center near the Arizona and New Mexico border. That is where we found Corporal James. Jenny looked around. Stand up, Jimmy. After Corporal Jimmy James stood, Jenny continued. Mr. James had enough, going for himself to ask God for forgiveness. He was the only one from the training facility that returned. There were over 4,000 terrorists. Mr. James informed us that the facility was in support of ISIS. John stood and looked hard at Mr. James for a minute. You have been trained to infiltrate us, Jenny gasped. John looked to his mate. Mr. James, did your handlers know when you were going to join us? No, sir. The plan was for me to move to Seattle and hang out where the Seattle police took their time off. Jimmy James shared, I was to come here next week. Why? John heard the answer by simply asking the question. Your sister is dead. They killed her about a month ago. After the last clean phone call, she realized what they were pulling. They were using each of you, threatening to kill you if she did not do what they wanted, and to you, they threatened to kill her if you did not obey them too. She took out 7 instructors and handlers before they killed her, John informed. But I talked to her last week. Jimmy James almost cried. I'm hearing something about a bad cell phone connection? John asked. Yeah, it's been going on for about a month. Jimmy turned white. Excuse us for a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take Jimmy and we are going to go and talk with God if that is okay with Jimmy? John asked. Yes, sir. Whatever you think is best. John and Jimmy were gone. John took Jimmy to the Christports and had him sit down. As John looked around, he noticed a young lady with the same golden brown hair color as Jimmy had. She touched John as she moved by and sat in the Christport next to Jimmy. Hi, Jimmy. Jill! Jimmy had his sister in his arms as he hugged her. John turned and bent to catch Gaia as she jumped into his arms. Hi, Pumpkin. Daddy, I'm not an orange vegetable, am I? Gaia giggled. I use it as an endearment of love and respect for my future little girl. John hugged her tight and kissed her nose. Okay, I think. Thank you, Daddy. I'll be your pumpkin. Love you, Daddy. Gaia kissed John. John and Gaia turned and saw the smiling faces of Jimmy and Jill James. Jimmy looked to John. Did you lose her? John rubbed noses with Gaia. This is my future daughter. She is an expression of Mother Earth. Jill gasped. That is the second time tonight I have heard a lady gasp. I need to leave you. John turned his head to Gaia. And you. I love you. John turned to James. I'll be back in 2 hours. John set Gaia on her feet and kissed her on her nose and was gone. 3 minutes after he had left, John was back. Jimmy is meeting with his twin sister Jill James. They are sitting in the Christports. We agreed upon 2 hours. Kathy Hendrickson stood again. John, we all know of the Last Supper. I'm hearing this might best be called the First Supper with John the Christ. John stood and looked around the assembly. Many smiling faces and several were nodding. I'm just a man. A short time ago, I got shot. Hurt like hell. Every one of you is more capable than I was just a month ago. Kathy continued, we want to be your disciples. Kathy, and well, everybody. I have been told that I am the one responsible for the transition of this planet from the 3rd dimension to the 4th. I do not need disciples. I need teachers. Those of you that wear the red lanyard and can transport individuals to God, for them to have a personal relationship with God, is who I need. I do not want the terms Christ or disciple to be used. I am concerned that the message will get lost or confused with terms that are thousands of years old. Comforter might be a better term. I can see the Comforter in his many hosts of teachers. Stand up, Jenny, please. A day or 2 ago, we came upon 2 of your fellow officers down. I removed the 2 rounds from the chest of the man I was working on. I focused God on healing him. His body jumped and his eyes opened. I helped him to a sitting position. I looked over and the 2nd officer had his eyes opened and was also being helped by Jenny to a sitting position. John raised the black lanyard he was holding and placed it around Jenny's neck. The assembly was clapping and screaming their approval. John continued, Kathy, I do not want the title of the disciple to hinder you in your development. You are already a teacher and will become more so in the days ahead. You are one of God's teachers, not mine, but God's. A little girl ran up to John wanting to be picked up. My friend's Betsy, the little girl shared. And who are you? John asked. A young lady chasing her daughter moved in close behind her. I'm Peaches, the little girl smiled. Betsy says you're Santa Claus. John shushed the little girl and then whispered, Don't tell anybody. Okay. What do you want for Christmas? John asked. The little girl's mother was right there. A puppy, she spoke. Okay, we will see what we can do. I may have to get my elves involved. John smiled and hugged the little girl as he winked at her mom. Her mother mouthed, Thank you. She took the little girl and walked away as the little girl waved back over her mom's shoulder. After the laughter died down, Ladies and gentlemen, I understand you followed Peter into what could have been harm's way today. John went over to where Peter was sitting. John held out another black lanyard. What do you think? Will you follow him again? John was pleasantly surprised as everyone stood and clapped and nodded their approval. When the noise lowered, Peter, you have established a wonderful benchmark. What I am calling a benchmark is we bring everybody home. John placed the lanyard around Peter's neck. Peter stood and shook his hand and then hugged John to a cheering, happy crowd. The summer continued. John and his troops continued to prepare for the changes that were coming at them. John was buying everything imaginable to make the trip and establish themselves 200 miles east.